otherwise would oppose him and emancipation and might scuttle the whole war effort.
Harold Holzer has been our guest. AbrahamLincoln200.org is the website. Thanks for being with us. The House of Representatives is just going into session.
In order, Chair lays before the House a communication from the Speaker.
The Speaker's Rooms, Washington, D.C., February 10th, 2011. I hereby appoint the Honorable Jason Chaffetz to act as Speaker pro tempore on this day. Signed, John A. Boehner, Speaker of the House of Representatives.
Pursuant to the order of the House, January 5th, 2011, the Chair will now recognize members from lists submitted by the majority and minority leaders for morning hour debate. The Chair will alternate recognition between the parties, with each party limited to 1 hour, and each member other than the majority and minority leaders, minority whip, limited to 5 minutes each, but in no event shall debate continue beyond 11:50 p.m. The Chair recognizes the gentleman from Pennsylvania, Mr. Pitts, for 5 minutes. Gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As I rise today, I'm mindful of events occurring in Egypt. And I want to extend my congratulations to the Lillian Thrasher Orphanage of Asyut, Egypt, which is celebrating 100 years of service this month. As our ally Egypt stands on the cusp of a new future, one hopefully based on respect for democracy and human rights, we honor the people who have worked for decades to build an educated and productive civil society there. The Lillian Thrasher Orphanage, begun in 1911 by an American from Jacksonville, Florida, is one of the oldest and longest-serving charities in the world. It currently serves over 600 children, along with widows and staff. This pillar of the community has been home to thousands of children who needed food, shelter, and a family. Orphanage graduates serve around the world as bankers, doctors, pastors, and teachers, and even in the U.S. government. Despite many challenges over the years, the wonderful staff, now led by George and Fathia Assad, has continued serving the children no matter what the circumstances. We applaud the cloud of witnesses over the past 100 years who have supported this organization through service, friendship, prayers, and donations. And we support and stand with this great institution and voice our ongoing support for this and other similar Egyptian grassroots organizations during this critical period in the nation's history. And I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. The Chair recognizes Mr. Braley from Iowa for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. There are 435 members of the House of Representatives. We come from all over the country, and every one of us encounters people from the towns and cities and rural parts of our district that inspire us through the heroic action that they exhibit in every day of their lives. And, Mr. Speaker, I rise this morning to talk about one of those heroic people that I've known for 35 years. Her name is Bev Renz, and I met her when I was working with her husband at a grain elevator in the small town of Hartwick, Iowa. I later got to know her better playing softball for a team called the Front Street Tap, located in Brooklyn, Iowa, and Bev's voice was always the loudest voice on the field because that's the kind of person that she is. She is passionate. She is fierce in her dedication to her friends, and she has devoted her entire life to making her community, her state, and her country a better place for all Americans. Bev recently had a curveball thrown at her when she was diagnosed with amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, also known as ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease. Bev has always taken life head-on, and that's how she addressed this challenge, the same way she has lived her life every day that she spent on this earth. She didn't get into self-pity. She started thinking about what she could do to stay connected to her friends, her family, and the important issues that she has cared about all of her life. Those of us who've known Bev have known her as a nurse, as a community volunteer, and a political activist. And in fact, her start in politics began in 1988 in the Iowa caucuses when she went to caucus for a candidate named Jesse Jackson. And she participated in her last Iowa caucus for another political candidate named Barack Obama. Bev recently celebrated her birthday on February 3rd, and you can see her surrounded in this picture by friends and family, including a grandson that is the light of her life. But one of the things that Bev's life teaches us is that we face challenges every day, and no challenge is too great for us to solve if we come together in a spirit of cooperation and a belief in the common good, that we can solve the problems that we face as a country. And that's why I'm here talking about my friend Bev Rentz, because she is an inspiration to all of us in terms of what we can do to fight for a better America. She decided a long time ago that access to health care was an important priority being denied millions of Americans, and she knew that from her work as a frontline care provider, taking care of sick people and trying to take care of them in their end-of-life experiences is one of the most precious times that a family gets to spend together. And so as a nurse, Bev fought for health care improvement that would improve quality of care to patients and expand access to care so that no American could say that they died, no American family could say that a loved one died because they didn't have access to the type of care that all Americans deserve. It's important for those of us who are struggling with this issue of how we provide quality, affordable health care to Americans to think about inspirational people like Bev and what she's done her entire life to help people in need, whether as a community volunteer, as a nurse, as an activist. What is the legacy that we will leave to our children and grandchildren when they look back at this Congress and say, what did you do to help me in my time of need? Because Bev never worries about that question. She says, I'll be the first one in, and I will fight until I don't have any breath in me left to give. And that's why you'll still find Bev on her computer every day, networked with friends around the country, talking about issues of vital public importance, trying to be part of the important discussion that Americans have every day about improving the quality of this country. And predictably, in the wonderful small town where I grew up, Brooklyn, Iowa, Bev's story has inspired many others to pick up the cause, and they formed what's been called Bev's Brigade, an army of loyal volunteers who show up at her house every day to take care of her basic needs after a lifetime of helping others. It's one way we pay it forward in this country, through the example that others have given us, to think every day about what we can do to help each other. And that's why Bev is an example to all of us of what American spirit is all about, and I yield back.
The gentleman is yield back. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Florida, Ms. Ross-Leighton, for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. A few days ago, I lost an irreplaceable part of my family. My mother, Amanda Ross, passed away from complications due to Alzheimer's. She was a warm, loving, and caring woman who led an extraordinary life. She was my father's rock, soulmate, best friend, and companion for 65 years. They led a unique and joyous life. She always kept him company and guided him with her wisdom and her kindness. It was her strength that helped our family transition as we fled the Castro regime and settled in South Florida. It was her determination and sense of purpose that inspired my father and her to start a small freight forwarding company in Miami that they ran together for over 30 years. Abu Mandi, as we called her, was an amazing grandmother. When I was first elected to Congress, my kids were very young, and my mother was an unwavering source of support, taking care of them and traveling with me whenever I was in D.C. Her actions made my transition to Congress all the more manageable. My most ambitious goal was never to be a member of Congress or to be chair of an important committee. It was to be for my children the kind of mother that she was to me. She always taught me to be proud of my Cuban heritage and of my Jewish legacy. My mother had many causes that were near and dear to her heart. First and foremost, both my parents championed the cause of a free Cuba. They participated in many projects to achieve this noble goal, and it saddens me deeply that my mother did not live long enough to see this goal of a free Cuba become a reality. Her other passion, Mr. Speaker, was promoting organ donations. My mother believed in a world where individuals would help and care for one another. She believed that organ donation was the least that one could do for others. And I hope that others heed my mother's passion and become enthusiasts of organ donations. Losing someone we love to Alzheimer's is sadly becoming all too common in our country. They call Alzheimer's disease the long goodbye, and it is something that no family should have to go through. You see a person whom you remember to be full of life, wonder, and passion become a shell of her former self. It destroys brain cells and causes memory changes, erratic behaviors, and loss of body functions. It slowly and painfully took away my mom's identity, her ability to connect with others, to think, to eat, to talk, to walk, to find her way home. Every 70 seconds, someone new develops Alzheimer's. Too often, Alzheimer's falls under the wrongly held belief that it's an expected part of aging. We must raise awareness of the disease and provide a voice to the voiceless. We must improve early screening and detection, giving families and loved ones a better chance to prepare for and slow the onset of this disease. Families living with an Alzheimer's loved one need all the support that they can get. My mother was fortunate enough to have our entire family rallying around her, as well as outstanding medical personnel who helped us manage the disease. 87% of the time, it is family members who are the primary caregivers. Family members need assistance. It is tough for families to deal with everyday struggles of caring for loved ones with this disease, and the emotional stress is quite high. 1/3 of caregivers develop symptoms of the disease. The financial toll is significant. My mother may be gone, but her legacy and love will forever be a constant presence in our lives, and we must all work together for a cure for Alzheimer's. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for the time.
The gentlewoman yields back. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Jackson, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Let me first identify with the two previous speakers and offer my sincerest condolences and heartfelt feelings. Mr. Speaker, there is no higher sacrifice in our nation than military service. Our men and women in uniform serve honorably, whether they are stationed at a base here in the United States or serving in combat zone far from home. Some join the military out of patriotism. Some join in order to see the world, but for many, those motivations are coupled with another factor, the lack of jobs in our communities. Facing shaky prospects, many young people turn to military service as an honorable, good-paying career. But too many veterans end up unemployed when they leave the military. After dodging bullets on the battlefield, they find themselves jobless in the marketplace. In the last few weeks, I've issued a call for unemployed Americans to send me their resumes at resumesforamerica@mail.house.gov so that I may enter their stories into the record as a way of dramatizing the shameful unemployment problem in this nation. I've heard from thousands of Americans, including a number of veterans, who are struggling under the weight of unemployment. Mushi Israel of San Diego, California, is a Navy veteran who served for 20 years. He's an information technology specialist who's been out of work for an entire year. As Mr. Israel said, there are a lot of great people who are out of work, like myself, who believe in the American dream and society and just want to do an honest day's work for an honest day's pay. David Ranke of Burbank, California, was an Army lieutenant who received an honorable discharge in 1980. Although Lieutenant Ranke said in an email to me that his service was, quote, brief and undistinguished, I beg to differ. Anybody who puts on a uniform is distinguished and has the right to a good life right here in America. David worked for an event staging company for over 20 years. As he put it, unfortunately, the economic downturn forced our company to lay off 50% of the staff in an attempt to remain economically viable. I was one of those casualties. So after serving our country, Lieutenant Ranke became an economic casualty. He lost his job in January of 2010 and has been in substitute teaching where he tries to make ends meet. Andy Lang, a retired disabled veteran, Snow Hill, North Carolina, who's been out of work since last January, wrote, "You don't know how scared I am, Congressman. Some days I don't eat. Americans need help. They need it now." Miss Harmony Leonard of Bradford, Pennsylvania, wrote to me. She served in the U.S. Navy from 1975 to 1979 and was honorably discharged. Ms. Leonard has worked as a teacher, a grant coordinator, a development officer, a general manager of a restaurant. She's active in her community and said, "I did everything I could to be a vital part of my community. And now I have accumulated experience and education. I seem to be invisible and of little use to society." She continues, "My saving grace is that I am a veteran, so I have medical care should I need it. And I'm not starving because my partner is working in the natural gas industry. But what about me? What about my self-esteem? What about the stigma attached to not working?" Mr. Speaker, there's not a member of this body who has a good answer for Ms. Leonard. How can we look at our veterans in the eye, thank them for their service, and then tell them they are fresh out of luck when it comes to finding a job? How can we let them down like that? I want to hear more stories like this because I know they're out there. And I know there are more veterans who serve our country with honor and dignity and now find themselves unemployed. So I'm calling on unemployed and underemployed veterans to send me your resume and your story to resumes@mail.house.gov. I'll submit them for the congressional record so that unemployment problem among our veterans can be put in front and center before our government. Sending me your resume will not get you a job, but it can help force Washington to end the unemployment problem once and for all. Again, veterans and service members can send their resumes to me at resumesfromveterans@mail.house.gov. Mr. Speaker, service to our nation is an honorable profession, as we should honor the service by seeing to it that every veteran has a job when their service is over. When you risk your life for your country, we should make sure you have a life when you return. No veteran should be left questioning how they will feed their family, wondering about their self-worth, or fretting about their financial future. It's time, Mr. Speaker, we do something to end unemployment once and for all for everybody, especially our veterans. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. The gentleman yields back. Chair now recognizes the gentleman from Rhode Island, Mr. Cicilline, for 5 minutes.
Good morning, Mr. Speaker. Thank you. I rise today with a question for my friends on the other side of the aisle. When will we get down to the business of putting people back to work? My constituents in the 1st District of Rhode Island sent me here to do everything I can to get our economy back on track, pave the way for sustained recovery, and get Rhode Islanders back to work. And that's why my colleagues and I in the Democratic minority are focused on job creation, economic development, and debt reduction. However, the first actions by the new Republican majority during their first month have not been consistent with these principles. Unfortunately, my constituents, like Rhonda Taylor, for example, from North Providence, Rhode Island, whom I met with yesterday, do not have months and months to wait for my Republican colleagues to get their priorities straight. She's already been waiting and waiting. And that's because Rhonda lost her job in the information technology field due to outsourcing almost 3 years ago. And her unemployment compensation benefits were exhausted nearly a year ago. Rhonda is a mother of 3. She's liquidated her savings and sold all of her possessions, and now she's afraid she'll become homeless. Rhonda proves why there is no time to spare. We need to focus on policies that create jobs today. The struggles of our unemployed friends and neighbors are heartbreaking and unfortunately all too common. People like Rhonda have no time to wait. The partisan games have to end. Unfortunately, Rhonda's story is not unique. I've been hearing similar messages for the past year from men and women all across Rhode Island. But instead of working on policies that will help real Americans like Rhonda, my friends on the other side of the aisle are playing politics with the federal budget and the national debt. A budget that even Republican economists say could lead to double-digit unemployment and reverse the economic growth that is starting to take hold. Blind budget cuts my colleagues in the majority are pursuing won't help people like Rhonda, but would rather do more to cut jobs than save to create them. What my friends fail to recognize is that partisan political games will not solve our nation's unemployment crisis, which plagues nearly 14 million of our friends and neighbors. The fact of the matter is the challenges facing us as a nation are not Democratic challenges or Republican challenges. They are our challenges, and they require American solutions. The work is demanding, yes, and it will test the will of both parties to make difficult choices. But as a Congress, we need to both responsibly reduce the deficit, cut spending, but also make the smart investments that will create jobs now and guarantee the prosperity of our great nation. Our nation must make the investments in education, innovation, infrastructure, science and research that are critical to rebuilding our economy and putting people back to work. Because we cannot compete in the short term if we cannot innovate. And we cannot innovate in the long term if we fail to provide our children with access to a high-quality education. We cannot move goods and services throughout the economy if our infrastructure is crumbling. And America cannot make things again if we do not support the research, the entrepreneurs, the small businesses and manufacturers that transform ideas into new products. People like Rhonda back home in Rhode Island and hardworking people all across this nation have suffered for too long. We must have the courage to set the right priorities, cut what doesn't work or isn't needed, live within our means and make the right investments that ensure our ability to compete in the global economy today and into the future. I call on my Republican colleagues to join me so that we can focus on putting Americans back to work by developing common sense solutions and focusing on jobs. I thank you, Mr. Speaker, and yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back. The chair recognizes the gentlewoman from North Carolina, Ms. Fox, for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I am so pleased to hear my colleagues start talking about the need for jobs. For the last 4 years since they've been in control of the Congress, Republicans have been talking about that and how their job-killing policies have worked against the American people. But, Mr. Speaker, today I want to speak about an outstanding industry in the 5th District of North Carolina that has gone about creating jobs. Businesses that create jobs and invest in their communities are our ticket to economic growth and recovery in today's economy. That's why it's impressive that Ingersoll Rand's manufacturing facility in Mocksville, North Carolina, recently received the Davie County Chamber of Commerce's Business of the Year Award. The hardworking people at Ingersoll have brought about 200 jobs to Davie County in recent years, which during these difficult economic times is a tangible boost to the community. These are good jobs that are strengthening the local economy. Ingersoll's major investment in Davie County is a tribute to the fact that the area's skilled workforce is composed of men and women who are dedicated to producing the best products in the world. The hundreds of workers at Ingersoll in Mocksville are the driving force behind this award, and I tip my hat to everyone at Ingersoll Rand in Mocksville for this important recognition for their hard work and investment in Davie County, North Carolina. And with that, I yield back, Mr. Speaker.
The gentlewoman yields back. The chair recognizes the gentlewoman from the Virgin Islands, Ms. Christensen, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Next week, President Obama will send his budget to Congress. The news coming from the White House will not be good, but the rumors of a budget war from the Republican leadership promises to make a bad situation much, much worse. From what we're hearing, all of us can expect the same Republican policies which took an over $5 trillion surplus that Democrats and President Clinton sacrificed to create and turned it into the dream-crushing deficit that we are faced with today. They've made cutting spending sound like a good thing, but it is not when you look at where the cuts will come from. They will not come from the tax cuts for the wealthy and not from the wars we need to end, but they will come from programs that communities and families need now more than ever. This is Bush deja vu all over again. And every economist that I've read says that with this economy in such a fragile state, with the country only at the beginning of recovery, and with far too many of our fellow Americans hurting, this is not the time to cut spending. It's not that I'm against making prudent cuts to reduce the deficit, but the cuts I'm hearing about so far will hurt those the President said should not be hurt, the most vulnerable, children, the poor, the majority of whom are racial and ethnic minorities and are disabled and are elderly. We in the Congressional Black Caucus have placed ourselves in the breach on behalf of those who would otherwise remain nameless, because no one is willing to name them. They are Native Americans, Alaskan Natives, African Americans, Hispanic Americans, Asian and Pacific Island Americans, and the poor and rural Americans of every race and ethnicity. As we do every year, we will develop a budget that treats all Americans fairly, does not leave anyone behind, but gives a helping hand to those who need it and also reduces the deficit. We agree with President Obama that his budget must put the country on a firm path to winning the future. And we know that winning the future means creating opportunity for everyone who lives in this country. But the CBC is further committed to making sure that everyone means everyone, to making sure that those who have been most hurt by this recession and those who have long been marginalized, even in the good times, have the special help they need to be a part of creating that future and benefiting from it. I cannot believe that there could be one member of Congress who does not support our country being number one, who does not want to win the future. But we can't win the future without ensuring that every child has access to a quality education and that those schools which have lagged behind because they lack resources and adequate, well-trained staff are helped to meet the standards that are required to do that. And we cannot win the future if we turn back all of the newly gained benefits and savings in the Affordable Care Act. We will never win the future if we allow the Republicans to pass a budget that causes us to lose those provisions which enable minorities, rural residents, and the poor to achieve better health, to be more productive, and to have a better quality of life. These health equity provisions will begin to end the inequality and injustice in health care that Dr. King called shocking and inhumane. And we cannot win the future if we don't do all that we can to make sure we address the mortgage crisis and help families keep the homes they need to raise their families in. We cannot win the future without jobs and more jobs. And I'm talking about good jobs. So we know that there will have to be limits to spending, but we want to make sure that it starts at the most effective time and that the sacrifice is fairly spread. That those who have sacrificed over the last decade while corporations and the rich made off like bandits will not be the ones to continue to bear the brunt of the cuts and continue to suffer while big business and the wealthy continue to amass more wealth at their expense. That is an affront to the principles of fairness and equity that this country was founded on. And so we want a realistic budget, not one that the Republicans are preparing that will cause us to lose more jobs, send more people into dire poverty, that will deny education and health care to those who need it most, that will continue the loss of homes, that will weaken programs like Medicaid, Medicare, and Social Security, which so many depend on, and one that will increase the deficit and continue to drive this country into decline, continuing what the Republican policies over the last decade have done. That is not what we want. That's not what the country needs. That is not the kind of budget that will win the future. And so we in the Congressional Black Caucus are willing to roll up our sleeves, put on our thinking caps, and work with our president and our colleagues on the other side of the aisle to pass a different, a better budget, one that will create jobs, that will give people the tools to lift them and their families out of poverty and keep them in their homes, one that will create an educational system that will put all of our children first, and a health care system that ensures quality health care to all Americans, a budget that will provide the retirement security our seniors deserve and keep our country competitive and strong and #1 in the world, a budget that will win the future. We know it can be done because we have shown how it can be done every year with the CBC budget. Working together, I know we can create a budget worthy of this country, one that lives up to our ideals, one based not on political ideology, but one that responds to the needs of our country and the needs of the people who are waiting and depending on us. Thank you. I yield back.
The gentlewoman yields back. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Davis, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I ask unanimous consent to revise and extend my remarks. Mr. Chairman, as we prepare to debate, and as we've already begun, to debate a budget that in many instances and in many ways spells gloom and doom for people who have been expecting and looking for some opportunity to move our government and our country forward. In order to really understand how we got to where we are, I think it's important for us to remember that President Clinton left President Bush with a 10-year projected surplus of $5.6 trillion in 2001, whereas President Bush on January 20, 2009 left President Obama with a $1.8 trillion deficit. And let's keep in mind that this was the deficit on day one of the Obama administration, weeks before the president enacted a single piece of legislation and the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act. The failed economic policies of the Bush administration led to this enormous deficit. The 2001 and 2003 tax cuts totaled $1.3 trillion over 10 years, in which most of the tax relief went to the top 1% of income earners. A Medicare prescription drug benefit with a 10-year cost of nearly another $1 trillion. That was not offset. 2 overseas wars that are nearing a cost of $1 trillion. A $700 billion bailout of Wall Street banks. And all of these unpaid for policies were compounded by the worst economic recession in 70 years that began in 2007, which led to huge shortfalls in federal tax revenue and increased reliance on unemployment insurance and other federal social safety net programs. In order to get these huge deficits under control, we have some tough decisions to make. We have some very serious and some difficult decisions as we attempt to balance the budget and as we attempt to continue to promote and project economic recovery. I've always been told that you can measure the greatness of a society by how well it looks after its young, how well it looks after its old, and how well it looks after those who cannot look after themselves effectively. So as we begin to talk about cuts, and you know where I come from, I've been told that if all that you do is cut, 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 all that you're going to get is blood, blood, blood. And of course, the blood of the people will be on the hands of those who had the knives. And so as we cut, let's look seriously at the Community Services Administration, the one little program, one little agency, one little area that still provides resources to fund programs like those established during the OEO War on Poverty days, when we took a good look at poverty and what was causing it. As we begin to cut, let's understand that health is essential for wealth. And so let's make sure that we don't tamper with what I consider to be one of the most effective ways of providing primary health care to large numbers of poor people in this country, the community health centers that provide primary care to more than 20 million low-income Americans without regard, in many instances, to their ability to pay. And let's understand that our prison system has become the largest in the world. More than 2 million people are incarcerated. And so let's not cut or decimate the little justice programs that we are funding to help these individuals try and successfully reintegrate back into society. And so I thank you, Mr. Speaker, and urge that when we cut,
Gentleman's time is expired.
Let's make a good cut and not those that cut the poor.
Gentleman's time has expired. Pursuant to Clause 12A of Rule 1, the Chair declares the House in recess until noon today.
House coming back in at noon Eastern for legislative work. They will take up 2 rules for legislation. The first one